carving out some time. We spoke with Aaron and Dr. Park about their vision for this work group. And this is the Rehabilitative Services Work Group, just for if you weren't aware. And kind of they wanted to dive in with the kids who are at the deepest end, and understanding kind of what services and resources we have available for those youth. So, thankfully we had already been acquainted with the Deputy Secretary, with Adina and Secretary Gary, and wanted to kind of start there to dive in terms of what DJS has available for the kids kind of in the most serious set of circumstances. So I'll turn it over to Aaron and Liz if you wanted to give any opening remarks, and then we'll just hand it off to Adina.
Sure, I'll just add that, oh, sorry, Liz. I'll just add that we're interested, obviously, in the full continuum of services across the system, but we thought this would be the best place to start. And we knew that the department's doing a lot of exciting things, especially around violence prevention. So we had Dr. Young reach out to the department and bring in the deputy secretaries to give a presentation around that. So we're happy to have them here today, and thanks, Dr. Young, for all of your work.
Thank you. Looks like we are joined by Deputy Secretary Lisa Gary. We did introductions, Lisa, so you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, and I apologize. I have technical difficulties today. My name is Lisa Gary. I'm Deputy Secretary for Community Services, Department of Juvenile Services. Glad to be with this group today. Okay. So I'm going to try to present, to share my screen. I never do this correctly. So just bear with me for a second.
We're in it together. You can send it to me and I can do it too.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. All righty. So let me try it now. Okay. And let me know if you all can see this.
Yep.
Okay. Is it big enough? Okay. Come on. Make this one. So we want to pick up from where we left off when we were presenting at the inaugural meeting of the commission, and Deputy Secretary Adina, Levi, and I talked about our respective areas of work. And so today we just want to take a deeper dive into the services in community once kids are post disposition, as well as what happens in placement. So I'm going to start out with talking about the probation and aftercare services, and then Adina will pick up with residential and treatment services, and then we'll have enough time for questions. So treatment programs in community. So once kids are in disposition and they go to out-of-home placement, they go into a treatment program. That's where Adina will pick up. When kids are discharged successfully from their treatment program, they then go back community supervision on a new probation order. We call, DJS refers to this as aftercare, but the order itself from the court is a probation order. So again, once they are successfully discharged from a treatment program, they come back to community supervision under a probation order that we identify as aftercare services. And so when they are placed on community supervision, they can go into probation. And we have what is deemed to be our traditional supervision model and enhanced supervision. We introduced with this administration enhanced supervision through the use of several types of specialized supervision models. I'm sorry, I can't see if anyone's asking the question. Does somebody have a hand raised?
Nope, you're good.
Nope, you're good.
Okay. So we have traditional supervision and we have enhanced supervision. Enhanced supervision are our Thrive and our Thrive Academy services, and a new level of care, not level of care, type of supervision called Thrive Passport. Just to start, Thrive Academy engages young people who are at the highest risk of gun violence as either a victim or a suspect. We identified them using a study that was conducted by the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform in 2023. That's Nick Jr. That's the name of the organization, and to identify who are the youth who are at the highest risk in Maryland of being involved in gun violence as either a victim or suspect. Also understanding that the majority of our kids in Maryland are more often victims of gun violence as opposed to the actual suspects or if adjudicated offenders. So we identify those kids based upon a range of things. Young people who have been involved in gun violence, either because they have handgun charges, they have been the victim of a shooting, they have seen and witnessed shooting, they live in high crime neighborhoods. These kids are more often not engaged in any academic or workforce activities. They also tend to have more involvement with the agency. From the study, we identified the kids at the highest risk of being involved in gun violence are more often to have had at least one out-of-home placement. So we use that criteria to determine the kids who are going to be placed in Thrive Academy, with the premier criteria being having been involved in gun violence either as victim, again, or suspect. We also, the value of the Thrive Academy is not solely that it is an enhanced model. It's enhanced because they receive what we call a suitcase of supports. The suitcase itself is significant in that these young people are assigned to a life coach in their communities. Those life coaches are what you may have heard the term credible messengers. These are persons who have either had the same experiences as these young people, have had their own kids engaged in the work, but most importantly, they know how to navigate the communities, these high crime communities. They know how to mediate violence and yield and broker peace between rival groups and neighborhoods. They also know how to access resources and support. So the credible messenger is assigned to a young person in the Thrive Academy, whereas in traditional supervision, that young person has a case manager as well as a treatment service plan, and they receive support through other types of services that DJS refers to, and that's identified over to the right. MST, functional family therapy, family-centered treatment, behavioral health services, mentoring, pro-social activities, education, and vocational opportunities. The majority of our kids under traditional supervision are serviced through the Choice program, as well, youth advocacy program, which we know is YAP, a lot of MST, family-centered treatment. But again, understanding that there's a significant gap in services that are working directly with young people in real time. And that's the power of the Thrive Academy and having a life coach, because there is a daily intervention by a person who is serving as a life coach, working with the young person on a life plan that he or she develops in concert with the life coach, the DJS case manager who's assigned to the academy, as well as that young person's family and their village of supports. So they receive a life coach, they work on a life plan, they receive incentives, they receive participation stipends weekly for engaging in pro-social individual group behavior. They also receive milestone stipends. Milestone stipends include graduating from school, obtaining a job. For some of them, it is even going through the process of applying for a job. So milestones are unique and individualized to the capacity and the life plan of that young person. The suitcase of supports also involves, because these are young people who are at the highest risk of being involved in gun violence, we also provide relocation assistance for that family. So we've had instances where young people have not been safe, they've had a threat on their life by persons in the community, so we're able to move them and their family into a safe environment. So they also get an opportunity to function without fear. And be able to work on some of their goals because they're not watching their back constantly. They also receive DJS pays for tuition assistance for a semester if they want to go to college, as well as if they want to engage in what we want to call transformative travel. We're introducing that. That is where kids go to spaces where they've never been before. You'll be surprised how many kids in Maryland have never been outside of the boundaries of their communities, never been to another state. Some kids have never been to another county. And so being able to engage them in a way that they get exposed to a multitude of things. And there's also workforce training and development for Thrive Academy kids. So now, as a result of our success with the Thrive Academy, we've served over 100 kids to date in that program, with only one of those 100 has had an incident where they were a victim of gun violence. And we have a 20% rate of kids who have Thrive kids who have been rearrested as a result of a gun-related offense. And again, these are the kids who carry guns. We want that rate to be much lower, but we also recognize that the model that we invested in is the model that works. So we are very pleased with the results to date. And as a result, we have not a spinoff, but we have somewhat of a replication of the Thrive model. And that is Thrive Passport. Thrive Passport exists for kids who we identify who will be high-risk behavior that lead to compliance violations, recidivism, etc. Those young people will then go to Thrive Passport and receive some of the suitcase of supports that Thrive Academy receives. They get a backpack of supports that includes the incentive for participation, that involves a credible messenger being assigned as a life coach, a life plan. What's different for Passport is that they continue with their case manager in community, but they do have a life coach. Whereas for the Thrive Academy, those case managers are specialized in gun violence reduction. And so after they are engaged in Passport for a period of time, the goal of Passport is to stabilize them and to avert any additional crises. There are a number of things that can take a young person off track, and dealing with trauma is one of them. So the purpose and the power of Passport is to stabilize them and to return them back to traditional case management, where they benefit from their backpack of supports, but we don't want to overly extend their probation order just for them to continue to receive their services. So those are the two types of enhanced supervision. Thrive Academy started in 2023. We're in Baltimore City and Baltimore County. Prince George's and Anne Arundel came online in 2024. This fiscal year, we are expanding statewide and working with, I think there's potentially 6 to 7 credible messenger groups who are applying to work with young people through a rate. And we are developing what is called a learning community, like a learning institute for credible messengers, working with a premier organization that consults on this, not only Nick Jr., who are instrumental in us setting up our Thrive Academy, but also credible messaging mentoring, CM3, which is located in DC and run by someone, Clinton Lacey. they will help us lead and build a learning community of credible messengers so that they actually develop and enhance and increase their capacity to engage young people in such things as CBT, cognitive behavioral training, positive youth development, doing their work through a lens of gender neutrality and equity. And so we will be serving the credible messengers to say, what is the range? What's the range of services and education you want to receive, and how do we build this learning community so it's an institute where they also benefit, perhaps receive credit for CEUs for participating in training. And again, these are persons who have been involved in the system, so this is a means of growing them and developing them professionally as well. So with that, I'm going to go to Adina. I need to pull up your slides. So I'm gonna stop sharing, and Adina, you have to talk a little bit until I get you ready.
Can I just add a couple things while you're doing that?
Mhm.
There's two other populations. So, we're becoming sort of interested in this pairing of credible messengers with evidence-based practices, with our own case managers, to use that as a way to focus, as the purpose of this meeting is on the kids at the sort of most challenged end. So the two populations Lisa just talked about were kids at highest risk of gun violence and kids who are high-risk youth who are not doing well on probation, right? That's Thrive and Thrive Passport. We did also kick off a program that uses credible messengers or partners with credible messengers and an organization called Heart Smiles, which is a really intensive vocational and support program in Prince George's and Baltimore City. And this is for those kids who were automatically tried as adults. The court then decides to transfer them back to the juvenile system. What often happens is they've spent 6 months in the adult system, sometimes actually in an adult jail. Then they get transferred back to us, and the whole legal system process starts over for many of them, which can eat up another 2 months. And now they've missed a whole year of school. So we've got a program that's similar to Thrive called Access that started in those two counties. We go to court at that moment when, the day the transfer hearing is going to occur. We get, word from the public defender that it's likely that the kid will be transferred down, or the state's attorney sometimes. We make a Thrive-like program available to them. And about 2/3 of the time now, the judges are releasing them when they were typically detained. And that's been going since April. We've had 54 kids in it and 3 rearrests. No failures to appear and 4 AWOLs. And then based on the success of this various efforts to partner with credible messenger organizations, the ABLE Foundation funded a program like Thrive focused on younger adolescents. Lisa, what's the age group and the name of that program? I always forget.
That's the Embrace Youth Leadership Program, and it's for kids who are under the age of, they tend to be 13 to 14.
So we don't have any outcome date on that yet, but
not yet.
It's important for you to know about. And we're looking at all of these things for potential replication. And, we're scaffolding them in. Lisa's got a slide that she didn't present today that shows when we envision expanding these various different, if you will, credible messenger-like options throughout the state that, we could forward to the committee at some point. But it's very exciting. For Thrive itself, we got funding from the Casey Foundation to do an independent, to contract for an independent evaluation by the University of Pennsylvania and I think University of Maryland is also doing some work with us on evaluating in a kind of different approach of evaluating all of the credible messenger contracts we add, so that we start to envision them in some respects like we do multi-systemic therapy and family functional therapy, and maybe even get some federal reimbursements for some of the aspects of them, like cognitive behavioral therapy or motivational interviewing, that are considered reimbursable because they have been sufficiently evaluated. So this is just the start for these. It's going to take a lot of work to find credible messenger groups all throughout the state. We've begun doing that work by having webinars and asking groups like yourselves, if you know anybody, please refer them. It's a much easier process than answering a full RFP. You just have to get a rate and then you're stand available to be able to provide these services. We can help by providing the training. And as Lisa said, we're hoping to have a learning community. So not only will they be getting trained in things like cognitive behavioral therapy, but they'll also be learning from each other, from, Garrett County to Ocean County to Prince George's County. They'll be sharing lessons they've learned and starting to form an affinity group. I'm unaware of anything like that happening nationally where, a department is that invested in partnering with credible messenger groups. Credible messenger groups are not yet a gold standard practice, but there's increasing research on them showing positive outcomes like we're experiencing. And I think actually Maryland is going to significantly add to that research with what both the University of Maryland and the University of Pennsylvania can add in. So I just want to add some of that stuff just to.
Thank you, Vinny. And I just want to say that the Thrive Academy is I can now say it's the award-winning Thrive Academy. It received the 2024 Innovation Award from CJJA for innovation in working with kids as a youth-centered violence reduction model. So I had to make sure we got much love for Thrive Academy out there. Those credible messengers are amazing. So.
We do have someone with a raised hand, Tanya Schwartz.
Thank you. Secretary Traldry and Lisa, thank you so much. Lisa, I was just wondering if you could repeat the locations that you mentioned. I was trying to write them down really quickly, but could you share where Thrive Academy and Thrive Passport are? And so
we started, we rolled out in 2023 in Baltimore City and Baltimore County, and we brought Prince George's County online in December of 2023, and we rolled out Anne Arundel County in 2024. With this fiscal year and the money that the governor gave the agency for Thrive expansion, we are expanding statewide, but that does not mean there's a Thrive Academy in every single county. We are using data to determine where gun violence is most prevalent and really a public safety a crisis. And so I can tell you assuredly that Montgomery County is next specifically for rollout, as well as Dorchester County on the Eastern Shore. There's a little overlap into Wacomico, but it's primarily Dorchester, which is Cambridge, Maryland. And then we also are considering what are the stats in Hagerstown. While they may not have the shootings, they have a high number of kids who are reported to carry guns, and so likely will be Hagerstown as well. So,
thank you so much.
And when we picked those 4 counties to start, those 4 jurisdictions, that's where 82% of the homicides of juveniles in Maryland take place. Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Anne Arundel, and Prince George's. So we dove right into the deep end.
Thank you. I think the focus was mainly to look at the programs and opportunities that we have for youth in the community. So I'll just talk a little bit about for that small population of youth who do come through one of our facilities, how we're sort of connecting and working with Lisa's team in order to get them additional services while they're in our facilities. This is the same presentation we did, so I can go through this pretty quickly. These are our detention centers versus our committed treatment facilities. Our committed treatment facilities, we have one hardware secure, which is Victor Cullen Youth Center, and then we have two staff secure, both Green Ridge and Backbone Mountain. And then Peace Academy, which is inside of our hardware secure girls detention facility. This is actually a girls treatment facility, and we do additional treatment services for the Peace Academy young ladies. We have that sort of in one of our hardware secure facilities because unfortunately there's just such a deficit of community treatment facilities for our young ladies, something that Assistant Secretary Davis is going to address across the state of Maryland and just fix it. So we don't have that happening. Within our detention facilities, I talked about this a little bit before, both BCJJC and Cheltenham, we have what's called our pending placement units. So those are young people who are post-adjudicated and have been identified in needing treatment services. Those young people start their treatment while they're waiting for a bed to open at either one of our treatment facilities or an external treatment or community treatment facility. So because they're post-adjudication, we can do intensive behavioral health treatment. They get obviously continued education support, and they can start participating in therapeutic activities. If they need substance use treatment, we can get those kinds of things started. The reason we want to get this started is because, we don't want youth sitting in our detention centers experiencing dead time, right? Waiting for beds to open up. So what we found is when we start to introduce them to treatment while they're in detention, their outcomes and stability when they do transfer to treatment facilities tend to be more. They're used to being in groups, they're used to having therapeutic conversations and those kinds of experiences. I wanted to talk a little bit about, as we look at like community opportunities that I didn't share before, is we have opportunities for our youth that are in our both detention and treatment facilities to work. So it's called YOLO, Youth Opportunities for Learning. I forget the acronym. Can you remember youth? It's fantastic. Okay, I don't remember the acronym. I can share it later. But these are young people. We have one external partner, DNR, Department of Natural Resources. So these are our young folks who are going off-site to work, and then we have on-site opportunity as well. So at all of our treatment facilities, we have young people working in our dietary services so they can get their safe serve certification and discharge with that. We've also expanded it for youth to do other kind of activities. We've got some young folks at BCJJC, which is our detention center, who are doing works around like supply ordering and warehouse and sort of sharing some of the work with getting supplies to our units and setting things up. So those are some of the things that we do. We also work with JSEP, the Juvenile Services Education Program, so that our youth, while they're in our detention or treatment facilities, can get registered to vote. They can vote, do absentee voting. They also have the opportunity to earn their driver's permit as well. So again, just preparing them for when they go out into the community. We've also expanded our behavioral health support. So what we were finding was that youth were able or getting close to that discharge date, and there were deficits in behavioral health support in their community, right? So we know they needed sort of some continued behavioral health support, either addiction treatment, a mental health treatment. And so we've expanded our opportunities for youth who are in our facilities to continue that relationship. We sort of call it a bridge program. So they're continuing that relationship with their behavioral health provider in our facilities so that they can discharge and not have sort of our detention facilities sort of stand as a pseudo treatment facility for youth. So they're not having to stay longer for that. Let's see if there's anything else here that I didn't go over. This is just more about our the sort of treatment that our youth are getting in our on our pending placement unit and our treatment facilities. One of the things that we've done is work to, while our youth are on pending placement, they can earn just as many hours as they would if they were in our treatment facility. So that's newer. We've built up the capacity on our pending placement units so that youth are earning and being exposed to the exact same program and opportunities that they would be exposed to when they transition to one of our treatment facilities. Okay, I think those are all my slides. I'm going to stop sharing and open it up if you have questions for either me or Lisa or anyone else on this call.
Can I just add a couple things before we go to questions? On the pending placement units, we were getting a lot of complaints during my first year here about how long kids were waiting to get into a placement, and there were calls to increase beds in the department's correctional unit, residential units, which I think we're going to call them residential treatment centers, but if your kid was in them, you'd feel like it was a correctional setting. So I don't want to euphemize our way out of that. We were reluctant to do that because we don't believe that correctional congregate care facilities are a good model for helping change kids' behavior. But we still didn't want kids waiting for months and months to get into our programs because it's really not fair to them. For folks who are not that familiar with the way juvenile justice works, one really big difference between the juvenile system and the adult system is that the juvenile system, because it's based on rehabilitation, has indeterminate sentences. So the kids get out when they're done with treatment. They don't get out at a certain amount of time. Maybe that's good, maybe that's not. That's a conversation for another day. But what it means is they don't start their journey towards release until they start getting treatment, unlike an adult. So if you're an adult and you get a 6-month sentence and you've been in jail for 2 months, that 2 months counts towards your 6 months. You're a juvenile and you've sat in Hickey for 2 months waiting to get to a treatment program. You still got to go through that whole treatment program when you get there. And if that's a 6-month program, you still got 6 months. If in that 2 months you're in a pending placement unit and getting your dialectical behavioral therapy and 7 challenges hours, that's all going to come off the amount of that treatment you got to get when you get to the next place. We just had our pending place. We have pending placement unit meetings every quarter to examine, are kids getting their proper amount of dosage while they're in pending placement? Are kids getting kicked out of placement too frequently? A bunch of things that drive pending placement. And the net of it was, when we started this, we often had 60 kids pending placement. We're now mostly in the 30s, about the number of kids waiting. And that's despite the fact that during that year, that since we've started this pending placement unit, we've had a 19% increase in kids placed. So we dropped by about, I want to say, more than a third in terms of kids waiting at a time when we got a 20-ish% increase in kids being put in. Also, just idiosyncratically, our placement programs tell us that the kids arrive better prepared to be in treatment because they've been receiving treatment. So they're better behaved. They get fewer, disciplinary shots, things like that, because of the fact that they've been in pending placement.
They've been introduced to family treatment, so the parents are participating as well. Okay. Open up to any questions.
I don't so much have a question. I just wanted to say I want to commend the department just in terms of that continuity of care for kids, hearing that kids can maintain that mental health provider once they leave is huge. We know that change from therapist to try and get engaged with a new therapist, often there's a drop off. So to be able to allow kids to do that, I think is huge. So that then if they do transition to somebody else in the community, that other therapists can help them do that. And, that warm handoff is huge. And then also what you're doing on the front end in terms of kids pending placement, starting treatment then. And it's not surprising to me that then they're doing better in treatment because they're already getting the head start. So just really think that's really important work because we know underlying a lot of the behaviors we see is this mental health problem. So just great work. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. I'll also talk a little bit about positive youth development and just introducing our youth to pro-social activities. So we do this just across the spectrum of our facilities, but where we really, I think, sort of match kind of what Director Lisa Gary talked about was exposing youth to things that they might not otherwise have been exposed to. So we're taking our kids like camping, skiing, canoeing, you know, hiking, all those kinds of really cool things and all within this great state of Maryland. You know, they don't even have to go out of state to, you know, be far from home to kind of enjoy these kinds of things. And it's really important that they kind of be exposed and learn other ways, you know, to occupy their time. So we really enjoy doing that as well. Brandy?
So when you're taking the kids out, I know a lot of these kids come from poverty-driven homes.
Mm-hmm.
Are their parents expected to pay for the costs associated with this, or do the program take care of all of that?
The program takes care of all this. This is part of our treatment program model, right? So we want to teach them pro-social activities. We want to teach them volunteering. They do volunteering activities as well, things like that. So this is built into our treatment program and is at no cost to the youth or the parent. Thank you for that question.
It's the same on the community side with transformative travel. So some of the parents will be involved as well in going to some of the places and participating in some of the activities at no cost to them, because that is a family-centered perspective and model. So
also, when they do work, like was described with the YOLO Academy, you know, with the Department of Natural Resources, for example, or the work that young people in the community do, or apprenticeships, they get paid. So it's not only don't they have to pay for anything, but they get paid when they work, just like anybody else gets paid.
The students, the participants that volunteer, do they get service learning hours?
They do. Yeah. So we just had a really big service learning opportunity over the Martin Luther King holiday. Our youth wrote letters to first responders. They created signs. Some of them went to the United Way and a bunch of various other opportunities. So not only can we look at that counting toward sort of pro-social activities, but we work with JSEP, our educational provider, so that they get those service learning hours as well.
A question for Deputy Secretary Gary. You might have already mentioned this, but the caseloads for the Thrive Academy, are they smaller caseloads, and what kind of training do the probation officers go through?
thank you for that. No, I didn't mention that. So the ratio caseload is 1 to 5, 1 credible messenger to 5 young people. It is the same for the DJS case managers, but it may be a little bit higher, and it is 1 to 7 right now. The DJS case managers engage in training with the credible messengers. So they're learning what the work is of the credible messenger, how to really transition from a compliance model to one that is youth and family centered, that is very community anchored. And that is quite a leap for, within a system. And so they receive training, and we meet quarterly, they meet monthly with the credible messengers as a group, but they also engage in case reviews every single Friday. So there's always that communication between the credible messengers as well as the case managers who work for DJS, who are assigned to the Thrive kids. They also are exposed to gun violence reduction strategies more often than our other case managers, because they have to know what works for that population. And so they are engaged in a number of conversations around the country with credible messenger groups. And they also will be leading, as we look at Thrive Passport. If you can recall, I did say that for Passport, kids will retain their case manager. They won't have a specialized case manager, which means that my traditional case managers, they have to learn how to work with credible messengers. The power of the credible messenger is that they are at the center of it. So how do we seed power? control or share power with life coaches. And so the Thrive case managers are going to train all other case managers on how to work effectively and collaboratively with the credible messengers. But the small caseload does help. That 1-to-5 ratio is significant. And these are kids who they are in contact with their life coach almost, sometimes they can call them at 3 in the morning. Sometimes I've had a question from the police about a kid. I called the credible messenger on a Saturday night. They called me on Sunday morning at 7, and he had that kid in the car. So even though it's a small caseload, it's a lot of work that they do with the kids in real time and the families.
Yeah. They're also coming into the facility as well to meet with the youth. So there's that continuity as well. So regardless of where that youth is, they have access to their credible messenger.
Thank you. And this is a maybe touchy-feely question, but how is it being received by your staff?
Credible messengers?
Credible messengers and the Thrive Academy.
It's a cultural shift, as with everything, again, because the life coach takes the front seat. They determine the pace of the ride, when they're going to stop, what's going to happen. So they really are the ones who are doing the driving and working directly with youth and family. For our case manager, it's somewhat of a shift for them, but it's not one that they are resistant to. The Thrive case managers can tell their peers, if I had one of them on here, they would tell you the benefits of that, because it allows them to sit back and see the whole elephant in terms of this is the long-term plan for this young person. It allows them to administer the case without responding to day-to-day crises that our staff, quite frankly, aren't trained to navigate. Our staff don't navigate those neighborhoods for the most part. Some of them do, but most of them don't. So culturally, it is a journey, and the more we expose them to the work of credible messengers, and the more conversations that we create between credible messengers and the case managers, there is this shift of acceptance, and then they start seeing the benefit of having that kind of intervention available for a young person in real time.
So I have a question. This is Delegate Bartlett. So who determines whether a child is going to a DJS facility or an adult detention facility? Is this all determined by the court?
It's dependent upon the charge as well. So if a young person is charged as an adult, the police will charge them as an adult, and the process goes in the adult route. If they charge as a juvenile, they come through the DJS intake process. If they are waived to the juvenile system from the adult system, then that's when we actually get involved in terms of the juvenile system. But the court makes the decision as to who's waived down. But if they are charged as adults from the outset, that is a police decision, not our decision.
So there's about
go ahead.
30,
Sorry, Secretary.
no problem. There's a little over 30 offenses for which kids are automatically waived into the adult system. So if you get arrested for carjacking, for example, and you're 16 years old, you're going to jail, and a judge there decides whether at a bail hearing whether you're going to stay in an adult jail or come back to us. And so I think there's data on GoCap's website about how many kids slept in an adult jail last year in Maryland, and it's a disturbingly high number. So at some point, sometimes the kids stay, depends on the judge, depends on the jurisdiction, depends on the crime. Sometimes they come back to us. The research we've done on it, and we can provide all of this to this group, shows that around 9 out of 10 of them will eventually either be returned to the juvenile system by a transfer. It's called a transfer. Correct, Kara? Is it a transfer? Yeah, okay.
They're transferred back.
Yeah, they're transferred back to us, or their cases get dismissed, and it's actually a pretty high number. I think it was almost a third of the cases that get just dismissed, or they get credit for time served. So they never end up in an adult prison, which is, good news. But the bad news is it takes months and months and months So by the time it's all done, Delegate Bartlett, it's about a school. Think of a school year. The kid is taken off the street for a school year. They get adult jail experience, which every bit of research shows makes them more likely to recidivate. And 9 out of 10 times they come back anyway, or they get dismissed. And so I know that there's some talk about legislation. There's been talk years and years about legislation that would stop at least some portion of them from automatically being tried as adults and allow them to start in juvenile court, at which point the judge can still decide after a hearing they want to try them as an adult if they're serious, but it means they never, for the ones that aren't going to be tried as adults, ultimately, they never set foot in the adult jail, and they never learn those lessons you learn in an adult jail, which I think from a public safety standpoint is a much better approach. When we did an evaluation of a similar bill that was proposed by Senator Jill Carter in my first year here, which was 2023, the savings was $20 million. And all of that savings comes from the fact that it takes many times longer to get the kid through the system. So that really is all that savings is just corrections time for kids who would ultimately, or residential time for kids who would ultimately come back to us anyway. And if we had that $20 million, I'd spend it on programs. If they let me keep it, that's what I'm going to do with it.
Well, I just would like to ask if I could have a copy of that, if you don't mind, or if you could even share it with the group. I think we would all find that very helpful. I particularly would find it helpful because it is my goal to get kids out of adult detention and lockup as the federal law has asked us to do. That is my goal. I am putting in that bill this session. I hate to use this as a commercial break, but I am. And if anybody wants to come in and testify, I'd more than be happy to have you there. Because quite frankly, I agree, it is a public safety issue. And we are talking in this group about rehabilitation, but we're doing the actual opposite as a state in the beginning when we're putting children in adult detention and lockup. And then we're going to rehabilitation afterwards. It's a defeatist. We're putting them in the back of the, what's the expression? You're setting them up for failure is my opinion. And it's not going to be failure necessarily because we do have these excellent programs, but why not just give everyone the best chance possible to begin with? So anyway, so that's my commercial break, and thank you very much. And I would love to have that $20 million report, because in this budget year, this is the time that, money is going to speak louder than anything. And so, yes, human rights for kids, I'm working with them very extensively. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate your message. So there's that. The other thing is I wanted to just personally commend the programs that exist. I don't think today, Liz Park, I'm not sure if today we're going to talk about the YSBs, and perhaps we're going to talk about them at another time that we get together and with the rehabilitation work group.
Yeah, probably another time, and then also maybe with the prevention work group, because that again is where YSBs really come in, is trying to keep kids out of the system. But there also are programs that offered by YSBs that work with kids after they come out. So certainly, yep.
Great, thank you. I have interest there as well. Thank you.
Delegate Bartlett, just two things in reaction to what you said, and I completely agree with it, that are just important for the committee to know. I just want you all to realize this is such a non-trivial issue just from a numerical standpoint. 61% of the kids in detention are detained pending adjudication in the adult system. And another, I think it's 18%, don't quote me on that one, have been returned to us. That's why we started the access program that gets after that group, right? And so I suspect that those numbers have declined in Prince George's and Baltimore City, but that's only 2 jurisdictions. So they're in that post-transfer period back from the adult court. So it's 61 and 18. It's darn near 8 out of 10 kids in detention. And if you look at BCJJC, for example, the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center, and you go through it, it wasn't designed for kids to be there 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 months. It was designed for kids to be there 3 weeks, a month. There's no football field there. There's no real outdoor space. Any of you that has an adolescent, imagine if they couldn't be outside on any regular basis for 8 or 9 months. That's what BCJJC is like. And I'm happy to give we could have a meeting there or tour it. You can meet with the kids who are being tried as adults if you want. We'd have to get permissions and all that, but we're willing to work through stuff like that if this group is interested. But it has a lot of kid specific impacts and a lot of system impacts. If this group wasn't clogging up this system, we would do a lot better work with young people. You are absolutely right, Delegate Bartlett. We're setting them back before we start the process of helping them. And 91% of the kids we send to state prison are Black or Latino. It is the most disparate area for us. Worse than the disparities in any other part of the system. Brandy's got her hand up.
Of the youth that are sentenced as adults and they're awaiting trial, how long are they sitting within the local detention centers with adults and not getting services if they can't go to the juvenile center until they go to trial? And I know local detention centers offer mostly adult programming, and if they're not eligible for adult programming, what are they doing there within that detention center? Because I feel like that's a opportunity to give them services while they're awaiting trial, or before they're transferred.
So Brandy, I can answer the first part, and perhaps someone else could answer the second part. And this is from the Human Rights for Kids latest report. It's called Disposable Children. And in that report, they say that the average time is 200 days.
And Ainsley just put a bunch of data from the Governor's Office of Crime from GOCAP in the chat, which gives you a really nice snapshot of what kids are going, what they're going for, and all of that. So it gives you, race.
And Brandy, I will take one little small stab at the second part of your question. It's my understanding, I've been told, I don't have the data yet to support it, that the services are not provided for kids who are in adult jails and lockup, that they do not get the same services that a child in DJS would receive. I don't, like I said, I don't specifically have that data. I will have it obviously by our hearing date, and I will share that with the group when we get our hearing date. But I do want to have it because that is part of the argument and support, is that, the whole point is, as the secretary said, you're missing a whole school year, and you're not getting, you're not getting a school, you're not getting your education. You're getting an education, but you're not getting your academic education while you're in in an adult facility. And just to tell you another part, we lose funding when we put children in adult detentions and lockup. We lose funding because the federal, the Office of the Juvenile Delinquency Prevention, the federal office, they actually encourage states to not put children in adult detention and lockup, and you receive funding if you don't, and if you do, you lose funding because you're considered out of compliance.
So I have a question for you, Secretary Schiraldi. So you said if you had that $20 million, you would put it towards programming. We know that you've prioritized kids with violence involvement, either as victims or as perpetrators. What groups would you prioritize next if you had that money, or what programs would you prioritize?
So we've gotten increases in our budget the last year, and we're proposed for another increase this year, which really tells you something, given how bad the budget is this year, that the governor's putting us in for a second year of increases. And we're figuring out the answer to your question, Aaron, in stages. Up to this point, Kara Annenson was acting both as our legislative director and as our services director. So doing double duty along with a colleague at DJS, while we sought out a new position, assistant secretary for services, which we hired, and she started last week, and that's Maisha Davis, who's on this meeting. We also got a grant from the Federal Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. I believe it's an $850,000 grant, and it's only planning. And that's sitting, waiting for Maisha to start. And as luck would have it, she has started at the same time this committee has started. So what Kara and her colleague Rachel Gassert have done is started to just pick off some of the areas that seemed very apparent to us. Thrive is an excellent example. 44 kids on our caseload got shot or shot somebody in my first year here. We got about 1,500 kids on my caseload. I ran probation in New York City, and I had 30,000 people on my caseload, and 44 people didn't get shot or shoot anybody. So that was pretty obvious that we needed to go there. So we've done 2 listening tours in every single county in the state with judges, prosecutors, law enforcement, public defenders, DSS, community groups. And so we started by filling in some of the blanks. We can present on what Kara and her colleague have done to date. But really what I'd love for this group to be is to work with Maisha and the OJJDP consultants as we do a full gap analysis of the services, because, you know, Cecil and Garrett are going to be different than Prince George's and Baltimore County and Anne Arundel. I mean, it's such a diverse state, which is really beautiful, but challenging when you're a centralized state agency. And this is exactly the kind of group that could really help guide us as we figure out our way. We will have good consultants. We have Maisha, and this is her, you know, sort of main focus is to evaluate and expand the continuum. So I hope that we can, I mean, the answer to your question is a whole nother meeting as to what we've done so far. No, seriously. And I think if you guys want to get another presentation, I would suggest one by Kara and Maisha and by our workforce development director, because we've done a lot to start to help kids get workforce experience and apprenticeships. But importantly, we're eager, I won't even say willing, we're eager to work with this group as we do the analysis, the gap analysis, to constantly feed it back to this group and get your feedback and feed it back and get your feedback, So we can essentially develop the continuum as an iterative process with this committee. You know, and then we feed it up to the whole commission. We'd be totally open to doing that.
Thank you. Do other folks have questions?
Not so much a question, but a funding statement. So GoCap has a couple of funding streams, one federal and one state, that I think intersects with some of the work that you're doing, particularly in Prince George's and Baltimore. Just to put it on your radar, there will be a NOFA coming out imminently under the Burn Skip program, where we're kind of piloting sites in Frederick, Prince George's, and Baltimore City around gun violence and kind of behavioral efforts to respond to or prevent gun violence. And anyway, the focus areas are there for now. And so there will be some more funding available to support services in those jurisdictions. So I'll make a note to send an email to you all when that goes live. And then our VIP program, the Violence Intervention and Prevention Program grant fund, the state agency wouldn't be eligible to apply, but perhaps some of your local partners who are doing the work on the ground could apply for that funding to support some of the work you're doing with youth. And as an agency, we're looking at investing more of our funding into kind of youth-specific violence prevention. So happy to talk more about that, but those are some opportunities to be on the lookout for.
It's great, Bethany. Thanks for that.
Also, or I do have one question related to Aaron's question about how staff are receiving the kind of credible messenger model. And I wonder if any part of the evaluation you all are doing kind of focuses on the professionalization and kind of cross-disciplinary nature of the work that you're doing. I think that could be really interesting. I'd be curious to see what the findings were about kind of what worked and, you know, learnings along the way.
I don't think that is currently a part of what they're looking at, but that does not mean that we don't have potential resources to look at something like that. Because again, as with any type of system, making that transition to working with community and kids in that way, particularly grassroots organizations, it is a tremendous lift. And so you do have to professionalize it, not only from the capacity of the credible messengers, but also professionals, staff, making room for them.
Yeah, and I've gotten outreach from a professor, Edie Ruland. I think she's at Rutgers now. She was at Minnesota, and she's done some really good research around probation and parole, and gotten, you know, sort of in and embedded with probation officers and people under supervision. And she's now turning her attention to studying the credible messenger movement area, and particularly, Bethany, what you just raised, which is sort of what's the impact on credible messengers? Are these dead-end jobs? Are people using the voice of formerly incarcerated people to say, look, we're listening to them, but then really kind of not listening to them? Like, there's all this stuff going on. Is it re-traumatizing for a lot of people? A lot of these folks have experienced awful trauma themselves when they were kids, and now they're providing essential therapy type services to young people, and who's taking care of them? Are there any sort of certificates? So we're scratching the surface of that. I think that if we become a state, deeply involved with credible messengers around the state, that will be a real statewide system, and it very much deserves being researched carefully. I think the learning community, statewide learning community on credible messengers, will be the first in the country in that vein. But that's the beginning, not the end. I would really like to get people certified so they have a certificate. I'd like to see if we can get credible messengers to gain some college credits when they get those certifications, so that if they want to go to college, they don't start at zero. All of that stuff is the future. Some of that stuff is the present. But I'd love to have Ebony or somebody else, University of Maryland's got some great researchers, help us look at this very question of what is the impact on this many credible messengers partnering with a department like ours, on them, on the culture change issues Lisa talked about. I used a lot of credible messengers, I partnered with a lot of credible messengers when I ran probation in New York, and the pushback was very serious there. This was an adult probation department. New York was, going through some real crackdowns, stop and frisk. There were 800,000 people being stopped and frisked a year in New York. That's more than live in Baltimore, mostly young Black and brown men. So there was a lot of sort of, tough on crime probation officers, and they weren't really too interested in listening to formerly incarcerated guys, partner with them. And so we had real pushback, and, we worked through a lot of that. Lisa's experiencing some of that now, nowhere near as challenging as New York was, but nothing either. So there's a lot to be studied on this, I think. And I think, the more we know about it, the results we're experiencing, particularly on that access program, 3 rearrests for 54 kids that previously were being tried as adults, right? During the course of, April through December, that's a pretty serious outcome. So, you can't become an evidence-based practice quickly, as Dr. Betzinger will tell you. This stuff takes a lot of antecedent research and then, randomized controlled trials. But, shame on us if we don't start to establish a research base on this, and also learn that, maybe some of the things we're doing aren't working and we want to stop repeating them and do something different.
So Secretary Charlotte, I just wanted to add to that, and maybe this is a conversation offline with your staff or your with Deputy Secretary Gary about, it reminds me of the alcohol and drug counselors. As that profession has evolved, they were people with lived experience who then were being hired, and then they've developed a model for them where they may not have that master's degree, but they have certificates and they're supervised by somebody who's licensed, and there's a profession, and then they could go on later. So that may be a process to look at of how that profession evolved, similar to what you're describing.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that.
I have a question about how credible messengers are certified and what kind of training they go through.
So they are not certified in terms of how we would look at a certified professional position. They do go through significant training of that organization and vetting. Just because you have navigated the system or come out of the system does not mean you're ready to lead others in and through it. And so they are vetted for their capacity to mediate violence, to work with young people, to adapt to models such as positive youth development, CBT. And the question at the grassroots level is less about how are you certified and more about, are you ready and in a position, are you healed and whole enough yourself to engage in a relationship with young people and families. And so, but the Institute will be designed to push them to and support them in terms of being certified in certain things. If they have an interest in clinical social work, can we have a model where they are actually supported through professionals of our agency and other agencies to study under people to get certifications? But again, if you were talking to credible messengers, one of the things they will tell you is that while they may not be quote unquote certified on paper through a state licensing entity, they are certified by the streets, and their credibility on the streets and their credibility for youth and families is significant, and it's significantly higher than professionals. So they are trusted in a way that's different than my staff. They form relationships different. So they protect their credibility in that way. I hope that answered your question, Ainsley.
Yeah, no, that answered my question. It was relating. I was wondering if it was sort of like Dr. Park was saying, the certified peer recovery specialist or something different. So that helps me understand. Thank you.
Any other questions for these folks as we wrap up here? I think we have 15 more minutes left.
Dr. Bensinger, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I want to ask the group a question in terms of, like, we came into the space and we are presenting on what we're doing in terms of treatment services. And as we think about our system and trying to be transparent and very honest about where we have deficits, if you could give us a wish list of top 2 things that we should be doing in community and residential, what would it be from your lens and from your perspective?
That's for the whole group, right?
No, just for you.
Everybody.
Looks like I'm going to take myself off the hot seat because Brandy raised her hand.
Okay.
So I live on the eastern shore of Maryland, so I'm very familiar with Dorchester County and all the counties over here. So I think one thing that is lacking here with youth and families is transportation. We can have as many services, try to set up as many mentoring groups, things for youth to do around here, but you find it a constant block to getting there because of the distance from a home to services or whatever the case may be. So transportation is a huge, huge issue here. So that would be number 1 on my wish list is transportation to and from these different services for the youth and their families.
And we do have a rural strategies team and community working on some of the challenges where you had geographic distance that is problematic or creates barriers for accessing programs. And there are discussions, preliminary discussions. They do a presentation to me next week and then afterwards with the secretary. But one of the conversations was about transportation and the use of Uber and Lyft and using those services, and also providing with one of our kids for an incentive in the Thrive Academy got a scooter to get back and forth. And so some things are just simple. Provide for your child as you would your own. So that's how we try to, but that is part of the conversation. How do we use the technology of today? And that's Lyft and Uber and things of that nature. Rideshare.
We don't have the Lyft and the Ubers around here. That's one of the things I keep hearing discussed is because we have the lack of drivers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we the Casey Foundation provided us with a consultant to talk to the kids, and it was, I forget where they did it. They talked to young people. They also talked to our case managers about workforce development issues and, what their desires are, what are challenges, and transportation came up most frequently as a challenge. And that was even true in Baltimore City.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in Baltimore City, it's going to take you 90 minutes to get to an 8 a.m. job at the port. You're probably not going to show up on time at that job, and eventually your boss is going to get angry with you, and you're not going to keep that job. I'd love to spend time with this group helping us think through that. Just since I know you're on the Eastern Shore, I will also say we've not had great luck so far getting groups to step up to get a rate to be credible messengers on the Eastern Shore. So if you or anybody else on this call knows of any groups, I'm going to ask Kara to send you all information about our rate setting process for credible messenger groups, so folks can refer folks to us, because we don't want to just make this the big 6 counties that refer lots of kids. There are formerly incarcerated people all over the state.
Yeah.
They live often in the same neighborhoods a lot of the kids come from. That could solve a lot of transportation problems. Kids don't have to go to them. They can go to the kids. That's not the solution to everything. I'm not trying to trivialize this. This is complicated. But if anybody knows any credible messenger groups around the state, please send them to Kara and Maisha, and Kara, please send them whatever information can help them think it through.
I will just note that we're working, Vinny, with the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, particularly around credible messenger programs as they roll out for you all. So they might be a valuable resource, and we could perhaps connect with you, Brandy, as well on that effort.
Great.
Vinny, are you guys working with DC at all? Any of the DC groups for credible messengers?
Yeah, so we are working with a CM3, Credible Messaging Mentoring. They are our provider for both Prince George's and Anne Arundel County. And again, we'll be shifting into a role where they're leading our Learning Institute, but they've been instrumental in helping us identify some additional credible messenger groups and along the borders of Prince George's County, Montgomery County, even some in Charles County. And one of the things where we do have a significant deficit, if anyone here has their feet on the ground in Montgomery County, Spanish-speaking and Hispanic groups, not just Spanish-speaking, but Hispanic, Latinx groups who are able to work with population in Montgomery County, where we see a lot of shootings and a lot of fatalities, adult and young people. So that is a deficit for us in terms of we don't have a way into those particular groups. And so we need someone who can support us and help us identify the grassroots organizations and the violence mediators in Montgomery County.
So there are several groups that are coming to mind that are based in DC, and I know at least one of them does work in Maryland as well. I can send an email. You may be connected with them already, but I'll send an email.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments for these folks from the Department of Juvenile Services?
I have just one final question. I guess this is for Mr. Secretary or either for Kara. What I'm hearing is that DJS, in fact, does have the capacity to work with children who may even, in fact, be charged as an adult, given the fact that they're coming back to you all anyway, a lot of times. So I've concluded that you do have the capacity. I just wanted to make sure that that conclusion was somewhat, merit, had merit to it.
Yes, we already are getting them back. Ironically, their recidivism rates are slightly lower than the kids who come in through the delinquency side. And I think that's possibly because what happens to them is based on the charge and not their risk level. So kids that aren't charged as adults, they tend to stay in the system because they have high risk for a variety of reasons that Aaron could tell you about better than me because he does our risk assessment instruments at the university there. But a purely charge-based system means a kid on a first-time possession of a handgun is going to be charged as an adult. That's the number one. You can see from the information that Ainsley put in the chat. That's the number one charge: possession of a handgun. Well, some kids that possess handguns are at high risk because they've done a lot of other bad stuff. But there's a whole bunch of kids in Baltimore and Prince George's County and a lot of other places that carry handguns because they think everybody else in the neighborhood has a handgun. And they just get picked up because they were stupid enough to bring it into school or whatever. They just got rolled on by the cops because they looked like somebody else. And they weren't that other person committing that other crime, but they had a handgun. So now they're going to be automatically charged as adults. So we get those kids back. Most prosecutors I've spoke with said they should come back. But we have this crazy system where they're automatically charged as an adult. So before they come back to us, they have to spend some time in an adult jail and standing in front of an adult court judge and all that stuff. We absolutely have the capacity to handle them. We are already handling them, like you said. That doesn't mean I wouldn't want to keep part of that $20 million. I cannot imagine I'd get to keep all of it, but I would like to keep some of it because I'm going to amp up stuff like we just talked about.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
With your help, by the way, with this committee's help. we don't have an answer. It's not like a secret thing where we're going to come to, we really know what we're going to do, but we're really willing to put our cards on the table to have a smart group like this with a bunch of data and a bunch of research and a bunch of focus groups and surveys. We're willing to put that stuff on the table and munch on it together to come out with the best solution. At the end of that, we feel like it'll be a solution that'll be more likely to have buy-in and work for everybody than if we just sat in our offices and made it up.
With that, I think I'm gonna thank you all for coming and giving this presentation today. I really found it valuable, and I hope the rest of the committee did as well. We're very excited about the possibility of partnering with you all around what you learned through that community scan from OJJDP. And so I think we'll be circling back with you. I think we probably have interest in having Kara and Maisha present. And so Bethany will get with you and plan out what that's going to look like. And I also can't remember Dr. Park or Dr. Young, if we said this was going to be a monthly meeting or a bi-monthly meeting. We've already scheduled that.
So Ainsley, I think we've scheduled them as bi-monthly for now.
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
If we want to increase the frequency, we can. It'll be up to you, Erin and Liz.
Okay. All right. So we'll be back in touch, but thank you all for your participation today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.